Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Our special guest today is Rob Pianka. He's based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But we're not going to talk about Lancaster. We're going to be talking about being globally agile. And this is his specialty, as you'll see in the upcoming show. Rob Pianka has extensive experience living and working overseas, particularly the Middle East, but other areas as well. So his whole background and his whole approach is to understanding people, understanding cultures. And that means expression, it means listening, it means sharing things about yourself, all of which is done to establish rapport and relationship. You know, the Chinese have a slogan called Guanzai, which is relations and feeling good and feeling comfortable. This is the same idea, only Rob was doing this 20, 30 years ago. Let's tune in, listen, and learn from Rob Pianka. Thank you. This is Ed Cohen, your broadcast host on Global TV Talk Show. Globalbusinessnews.net is our parent. Google Analytics has been measuring what they call reader page views, audience page views, as well as unique visitors, but it's the page views that count. For instance, you're looking at this page, not somebody else's page. You're looking at this page. So we're here to educate you and entertain you as well, and network and learn some new stuff. Our special guest today is from Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Rob Pianka. Welcome.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for having me on.
You bet, you bet. So Google Analytics has been measuring us since '03, and they say 1.2 million reader page views from over 100 countries since then. But more realistically, since this talk show began April of 2020 through last week, Google Analytics has measured a little over 100,000, and in particular 25,000 or so since January 1 through a couple of days ago. Now that's up year over year. It's up around 20%. I don't know what's going to happen next week, but so far it's pretty good. And the reason why we have that is, of course, for the push and the marketing, but people have nothing else to do, I guess. So they're looking at this and something else. But so the concept here is to educate the global business community about what you do, and about your background and your product and the viability of your product for what's happening right now. Just starting is the economic boom post-COVID. Pent-up demand. Companies seem to have money to spend on marketing. although they're not doing it right now. They seem to have plenty of it, whether it's the government money or whatever, I don't know. But we want to make sure everybody at the CEO level and the C-suite, budgeting and marketing and talent management, whether it's recruitment, onboarding, development, assignment, whether it's virtual or in person, and then retention of that new skill set that's been developed, that's been invested in by the companies, so that the companies can get to a measurable ROI on their global business. Now, so I'd like to ask you several things, but what do you think of this idea of measuring the ROI of an international assignment, keeping in mind what happened 2 years ago may not happen as much next year?
Well, you can't manage what you don't measure.
Good.
At the same time, certain things are intrinsically qualitative in nature and resist measurement. So there's also measurement and judgment.
Yeah. So how do you retain the talent? Because the company's spending so much money to make people globally agile, and some people don't want to do it, but they're doing the job. So I don't know whether that's called presenteeism, but it's a lot of money the companies are spending to send people on assignment, right?
Well, success that is rewarded with new opportunities is a momentum that retains people. So you really need to break. You need to succeed and let them succeed, and then there are other measures you can take. But that, if you've got that one, everything else is easy.
So how do you think companies should prepare, and what does this cost? I'm sure they could spend millions of dollars on prep and not let the assignee and family go on assignment until they speak the language and they understand cultural differences, so they don't piss off people or act like an ugly American. So how do you prevent that?
Well, the paradigm since World War II is cultural competence, which is about knowing about the culture that you are going to encounter. And in today's age, you don't really know which culture you're going to encounter next. It's much more complex. It's international teams with members who change. Now, yeah, you might be going to Japan, so you can study Japanese culture. But generally, you don't know in your career which cultures you should know about. And for many cultures, particularly large homogeneous cultures or isolated ones, so Japanese culture or the Chinese culture, or because of its geographic and historical isolation, the US culture. I mean, we're pretty diverse, but we're still coming off of 200 years of isolation. And what we don't have as much as a smaller country, people from smaller countries, is some of that block and tackle basic skills. If you're not used to having to bond quickly with a person from another culture that just shows up, and then another one who just shows up from another culture, and you can't predict that. If you're not used to that environment, no amount of learning is going to really help you. So what global agility is about, going back to some of the basics and helping people get into the position where they could actually learn from training, from cross-cultural training. You can't, a person who is by virtue of background, and I'm not faulting anybody, narrow culturally, right? How much knowledge can you stack on top of a narrow foundation? Right. So we want to broaden that foundation, that comfort zone at the bottom. And that's personal transformation for us, but it's also transformation in a positive direction that gets really good feedback from the world. So I say, yeah.
Yes. So you grew up part of the time in Europe, and you had a lot of experience over the personal experience, and nobody taught you how to do all that, right?
Yeah, I got that with what's the expression? With my mother's milk. My first memories, my first 25 memories were from Beirut. And 3 summers ago, I had a chance to go back for the first time and remember those memories and catalog them and see the places where I had been. And that was an extraordinary experience.
So, were you? What was your family involved in the diplomatic corps or the military?
My father was a Middle East expert for the U.S. Army, so defense attaché in Tel Aviv was ultimately where he went. But he learned Arabic at Monterey and culture and social economic stuff at AUB in Beirut. I was born in Fort Hood, Texas, on an armor base. But so like any other Army brat, I moved around a lot. And it's relevant because if you look at the state of North Carolina, they have all those military bases and a really good social economic picture of America coming through there. I mean, you have a lot of military bases and they're not all officers, right?
Yeah.
So it's a good picture of America. And the North Carolina school system, elementary school, high school, they realized that half their class were kids coming in from, having been in Germany for 3 years, then they were going to go pop off to Korea. And so they dealt with it. They actually created this idea that this is an asset, right? That these kids are being trained early to be globally agile. And we need to use this because it's something that the general public isn't getting. And so if you look at North Carolina school system, it's very powerful in terms of its global agility training, how they've put it into the curriculum.
So that's one of the reasons why Research Triangle has always been a center, a magnet, if you will, because of Duke in particular, but now with Apple and Google and others moving in there. It's huge.
And at the same time, the younger generation is children 2 years old are playing with smartphones, and then they're playing with international playmates in the cyber world. And so by the time they get to be young adults looking at careers, they've only known global agility, maybe not under those terms, but a lot of us in the country didn't have that experience, right? In our coming up, we're still living in a mashup of the post-World War II world and this new future, which unlike other science fiction movies where you go to the future and you see something, it's already here, right? We have to deal with it. We don't get to journey to go there. It's already come and landed right on top of us. I mean, we're talking to each other through a vehicle, which tomorrow we could be talking to anybody on the planet. And that's, there is no avoiding the need for global agility.
Yeah, this is a miracle.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, we started this April 2020 because our live conference meetings were obliterated by the pandemic. The last meetings I produced, live meetings, were in Washington, D.C. along Embassy Row on February 27. And we had a sellout. Of course, who knew what would happen? but that was the last meeting. And then I did February 25 in New York Times Square and February 13 in LA in an area they call now Silicon Beach. And that's not only because of Hollywood tech being over in that area by LAX, but it's a combination of Boeing and Northrop Grumman and SpaceX all in the neighborhood. And that has attracted, tech people. Rather than go to Silicon Valley, they say, I'm not going up there. I like it here at the beach, So Google and Apple and everybody else, Electronic Arts, moved offices south.
Mhm.
And so LA, and now here down in San Diego, which is 120 miles south of LAX, that's getting overflow. In fact, Apple is hiring right now. They're striving to hire here in San Diego or for San Diego-based jobs.
Mhm.
Get this, in San Diego, not work from anywhere. 4,000 engineering
That's good.
related jobs. I mean, this area is red hot.
Yeah, and I'm sure you remember that, you want people to have hard and soft skills. And then we realized that they needed to have emotional intelligence too,
Oh.
to be able to work together. And now it's like emotional intelligence squared, multiplied by culture, because the people who are showing up in your meetings, your suppliers, the people you're selling to, the other engineers who are collaborating, the people who are coming in on the marketing or the styling of it to make your product not only functional but attractive, they're all coming from other cultures. And without global agility, you can't even start those relationships. And then without global disc, you don't really know how to sustain them and communicate, because in today's world, I don't know if you ever worked through an interpreter, right? You say something in English and the interpreter repeats it. You get to watch the reaction, and he's not said what you said because you talk for 5 minutes, he talked for 2, right? And in today's world, you have to be your own interpreter. As you're talking, you have to be couching it in ways that the people from different cultures are going to be hearing what you're saying. The one thing you're saying is being heard 3 different ways, and you have to make it sound that way. You have to choose your words and your body posture and your thing like that.
That is a good point. So on this mechanism here, it's not set up right now for closed captions, but it can be. We just didn't push the button because we're speaking English. But maybe that should be. Oh, thanks. Okay, we'll get to this in just a second. This is the disc, and it's a beautiful thing. But let's just talk for a second about, is it possible now? It seems like it's a no-brainer, but I haven't seen it, where even though we're speaking English to each other here, we will have audience in China and in Nigeria, as well as in Rio. Never mind Germany, okay, or Moscow. But will it be available can a consumer push a button who's watching the show, push a button, and then, although we're speaking in English, the translation in whatever language comes across the screen on the bottom?
It should be, but I'll make the point that unless you've said it with interpretation in mind, the translation is poor communication.
Got it. Yeah.
Translation is not what's needed. In proper interpretation is.
Yeah.
And it's, the way this has been solved so far is that there are I think it's 1.2 billion people on the planet speaking English as a second language and speaking it well, right? Compared to the 400 million native speakers. It's not an advantage to be a native speaker of English anymore, because there's 3 times more people out there speaking English and speaking it well, right? So English is the lingua franca of the world. So you'll generally have counterparts who are speaking English, but they're not interpreting or using cultural assumptions that we share. They will have different cultural assumptions. It's to say we're getting the words across, right? But are you actually communicating well? That requires global agility and that type of communication discipline that global disc gives you.
Boy, that's interesting. I'm looking at your graphic here from your website. This is fantastic. So if we could look at this thing for a minute. So in the front, those 2 silver towers, that's from Kuala Lumpur, right?
I believe you're right. Yes.
And then you have the Colosseum from Rome and the Leaning Tower of Pisa to the left, and then this other tower. Is that in Dubai, that big spiky thing, or is that somewhere else?
It could be. You've caught me at a loss. I think Bangkok's on the left.
Yeah, and Singapore with that thing on top. Yeah.
my graphic artist was very happy to put that together.
Yeah, this is really fabulous.
And it is modern. The technology, the communication technology created by DARPA in the United States and released has digitized the world, and all information has now been represented into this cyber world, and it's just spiking how fast it's growing. When I said before that we're living in the science fiction future that has come here, that has already come here, right? This is what we have to deal with. And it's kind of odd because, the World War II generation, post-World War II generation of Americans set up a world that wasn't going to have the problem that the Versailles Treaty created. Free trade, right? We created a free trade world, and then later on we created the internet. Now everybody has it. We're all face to face, eyeball to eyeball, right? And we're acting surprised, right? And we shouldn't be. We created this world, and we would be really good at it if you take the right attitude. Part of the right attitude is to be able to bond, with people from other cultures, who randomly show up in your life. But, there's stakeholders in your life. It used to be that it was not normal that your career from being a young executive to being a vice president or CEO of a company would hit a ceiling because a foreign company bought your company. Well, now it's normal, right? The bosses who are going to decide your performance, or judge your performance are not even in your country anymore, right? So that's something that we need to embrace, because it isn't going to go away. And we actually wanted this,
So if I can just circle back on a couple of things you just said. First of all, it's brilliant in a 30-second elevator pitch for going global and understanding things.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic, because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them, because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
I'm originally from Boston, and I began my work involved with global business in Boston. And, I do want to get back to you in a minute about this video. I was watching it last night. But in Boston, during the I'm going to age myself here, but the late 70s, me and a couple of, at that time they were called personnel managers. Now they're HR or whatever, talent managers. We're buds, drinking buddies. And of course, we're just kids at the time. But they said, why don't you come to work for us? I mean, one worked for the Analytic Sciences Corp. I'm not going to give names other than just, so they're a military contractor. Okay. And the other one worked for Digital Equipment Corp, DEC, which had been bought by Compaq, and I don't know who else owns it. I guess Hewlett Packard now. But they were the originator of the desktop computer on a commercial basis. All right. At that earlier, you may recall, computers were room size, and then these guys come along and miniaturize everything, right? And this was breakthrough technology, and it was right in the Boston area. And they weren't the only ones. But anyway, my buddy there was a recruiter, and the other buddy at, we'll call it TASC, the Analytic Sciences Corp. He was in charge of the whole people side of things. Now, let's talk about TASC for a second, because it relates to DARPA. So his job, TASC job, was, first of all, TASC was set up as a commercial enterprise, but funded by government money, DOD, DARPA, through Harvard and MIT. All right. And it was right next door in Cambridge. Okay. And so, and then they did something in the suburbs also, with a lot of barbed wire around it. And so what they did was develop navigational systems that could launch and control and target Polaris submarine missiles from under the water, blasting up and hitting a target, thousands of miles away. They were the inventors of that, okay? And then they had to commercialize it somehow by using all the different technologies. So TASC needed to recruit engineers, and who knew about all that stuff, Well, there were a few at Berkeley and Purdue and Ann Arbor, as well as Princeton and Columbia, but there was a whole nest, apparently, from Oxford University and Cambridge University outside London. And they needed to get those people over and teach Americans what to do here, because they already figured it out somehow. They always seem to be ahead of us, right? Those guys from Oxford and Cambridge. So so companies needed to recruit, okay? So Russ and then Steve says, we need a recruitment guide. You know how to sell ads. You know how to put things together and print, at that time, print. And we need a magazine that's beautiful. It shows all the historic aspects of Greater Boston when you live there, lifestyle stuff, cultural indoctrination, before people make a decision to come. But we want to encourage them to make that decision to come. So we need a guidebook that shows the lifestyle, the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, the lousy weather, the snow, the ice, but also the capabilities of where to live once you're here and you get settled. And how long does it take to drive from here to there? And what about the tax rates? And what about the schools? So I didn't know what relocation was. I knew a lot about PR and economic development, area economic development, because I worked in that field prior, PR, recruitment, and development. And so they said, can you combine all that stuff into a magazine? And we're going to show you how to use it. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I put together Settling in Greater Boston, a magazine, and sold ads to realtors and other people. And then of course, I hired writers, and everything was typeset hand by hand at the time. It's crazy. And so it came out, and it was a successful immediately, because TASC used it for international recruitment into Boston, as well as Digital Equipment Corp use it to bring engineers and software people into Maynard, Massachusetts, along the tech route 128, to work on developing the mini computer. And this was in mid-70s, right? Mm-hmm. And so our first guidebook, called Settling in Greater Boston, was published in, let's say, 1978, late 77. And it sold like 100,000 copies, like right out of the box. And it was all led by these two guys, my friends, who said, you don't know what you got here. This is dynamite stuff, and you got to do this all over the country, but do it right here first. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I began in this focus of mobility, if you will, relocation. And what it is, it's a communications device. So now what you've done with Flash Forward, you've taken that to the next level, the brain, rather than the physical. Okay, now how should people really think about all this? So just as an example, next week, Paul Johnston and I, we're talking with a lady in Sri Lanka, and she's a cross-cultural trainer and an immigration lawyer in somewhere on Sri Lanka, where all the companies are, wherever they are. And, you know, we found each other on LinkedIn. And then just yesterday, I've got a couple of people from Nigeria who I've never met before, but they found our site through the Global TV network, okay? And then they contacted me and says, hey, let's link, we can do some things together in the future, blah, blah, blah. So taking what you've done and your speech and relating it to what I'm doing is totally unrelated, and this is unrehearsed, and yet it's all about your idea of global agility. So Paul, if we can go back to the global disc picture, and if you could take us through what these different colors mean to you.
Global disc builds on disc, and disc dates from 1928. Really? And about 60 million people in the United States have had a disc report done. Wow. So one of the more common communication trainings. It basically will give you 4 types. And then because you have a dominant type, like up in the upper left-hand corner, you would be in direction-oriented or dominant, a D person, right? And in the right-hand corner, on the top, it's in the yellow, that's an I person. Now, a D person is more direct, right? They're very task-oriented, very outgoing. The I person is also outgoing, but they're a people person. So you're starting to talk about communication personalities, and we're all more complex. I'm a DC in the United States, but when I work globally, I'm an IS, right? I'm much more sociable because I need to be when I'm working in a multicultural environment, and I'm much more laid back, and I'll watch more because it takes longer to communicate. An S person is very calm, you know, and reserved. So when I'm working in a multicultural situation, I tend to be more outgoing, so I could create a conversation, but also more reserved so I can listen to what communication is going down. When I'm speaking in the United States with somebody who shares my cultural assumptions, I'm direct, right? And I'll get down to the details when we've agreed on something. That's D and C, right? So you can use DISC as a communication tool, and what Global Disc created by Csaba Toth does is to say, every conversation you have is multicultural. Don't kid yourself. Even inside the country, right? You're not really sure what the cultural assumptions are of the person you're talking to. So don't use DISC alone, use DISC plus the dimensions that Csaba has added to it, right? To be able to take your DISC knowledge and the discipline of your communication that you get from knowing DISC and actually exercising it in cultural environments. And it's a little complex, but it's real and it's as complex as the world is. We are not having conversations generally with people who share the same assumptions that we have. And we make mistakes and misrepresent and mistrust and all that type of stuff based on these dimensions of assumptions, which are invisible. So you have to be really careful about them. I can see what your body language is. I can see what your body tone is. But if you have a different sense of what time orientation is, and that's a very common one, we're very punctual, right? In the culture I come from, we're very punctual, right? And I've been in cultures where punctuality is actually considered rude, right? And it's not that they're against being punctual, it's that they're more in favor of being sociable, right? They group cohesion, right? For a lot of people, is more important than the timing of the beginning and the end of a meeting.
So would you say that's Brazilian or Italian, Greek, rather than German or Japanese?
Yeah, I'm married to a Greek American, and they call it Greek time, right? I worked a lot in the Middle East, and it's a common thing that the meeting doesn't start when you think it should. The work of the meeting doesn't start until the socialization has occurred. It doesn't really end when you want it to, and so you're blowing your next meeting, and nobody else is perturbed or upset but you. And you can actually by being upset at that moment blow the meeting, and if you slow down and it's not like we're against social cohesion or friendliness, right? That we also have those virtues. We just don't apply it in a business meeting, right? Well, they do. They don't work with people they don't like or trust, right? So your first job,
feel comfortable.
Put your agenda aside and know that you actually have connected with the human beings, right? And then maybe you might get some quick work done.
It's really interesting. Wow.
Yeah, and it's very common in today's world. If you get on a Zoom meeting and there's 15 faces on your screen, how many cultures are actually represented in those 15 faces? Probably 14 or 15.
Yeah, we did a meeting, I think it was March 1st was the last one, or maybe it was April 1st, where we had 20 people and 11 or 12 countries represented, never mind cultures. Yeah, and it was all about women in leadership roles, but and it was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Boy, there's so much to learn here. So when you're dealing with people, let's talk about the Middle East because it's in the news today, May 21. Yeah, in fact, today is 21 May 21. That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. And okay, anyway. Do you think that means anything, 21 May 21, other than it's the start of Gemini? But I don't know, astrologically speaking. So this is, this is stuff that the CIA uses, right? To teach how to, or any international organization, I would guess, right?
I associated with special forces more than, having a purpose and using agility to affect your purpose, right? Might not be the best way to look at it, right? It assumes a certain mastery of something that one can never be a master of. Global agility, as I define it, like I said, block and tackle, right? You can get good at it and then you can do a lot of things, but we're not trying to be complicated and we're not trying to pull off the sophisticated Hail Mary play. We're talking block and tackle here. Can you encounter somebody and bond with them? And the way I look at it is that if you become aware of yourself, right, as a culturally defined person, you first start out by saying, okay, human nature. Let's say human nature is 50% of who we are, right? 10% is personality. 10% is the unique experience that you alone will have on this planet in all time. right? The rest, say 30%, are dimensions of our identity that are colored in by our culture. It's kind of like you start out as a blank canvas for a paint by numbers portrait of a person. And if the culture that you're in, they tell you, okay, that's red, that's blue, and that's green. And you paint yourself in with these cultural definitions. So I'm from a country, everybody has a time orientation. Everybody on the planet has a time orientation. My culture told me to be punctual, right? So I'm colored in with punctuality, right? So if you're aware of these dimensions, if you become aware of your take on them, so you know that there's time orientation, you know that you're a punctual person. Now, when you get into conversation, you might be able to discern that, hey, that person doesn't really value punctuality. What's the alternative value that they're using, right? How can I communicate with them using their value? So, we can balance the two at least. We get something done on time, but we'll get it done together, right? That's fundamental, rudimentary, basic cross-cultural competence. To do something more than that, to build something really high end on that, like media manipulation, or like the propaganda kind, or marketing to specific cultural audiences, or humanitarian assistance, as in my own case, how you use these tools to work in conflict zones, right? You can add that on top, but you got to add it on top of a foundation of sensitivity. Like I say, with Global Agility, we will train you to have 22 ways to bond with the person, no matter where they came from, right? Because typically, you encounter somebody, like, you're from another country. Okay, then you start talking as if you're both ambassadors of the country. Well, it's more important that they share your hobby, or that it's, like in my case, it's a father who has, adult children. That I can bond on with anybody on this planet. If I try to bond on nationality, half the time you got some issues, and they're not issues you can settle. Keep it down to human levels. What can we do, since our lives are in this new globalized environment? What can we do with that fact? Right? I can't do anything about, world history, but I certainly could do something about my own ability to bond with humans across all these cultures, and to not get in preset fights. Basically, you could walk out there and there's 1,000,001 fights that are already set up for you to get into, right? I don't do that. I'd rather find out why I like the person and what their strengths are. I look at it as like, it's the 21st century is for Americans, in particular, we have a frontier. If you took the concept frontier out of our culture, I don't know what we would be. Right? Frontier is really important for us. Settling the continent, the West, outer space. Right? Well, between here and the end of the century, the frontier is a planet of people. Right? You and I aren't going to outer space. I don't care to go to the bottom of the ocean, right? Right. The only place to go with our frontier, mentality and our drive, to be outward oriented and to work with things in our lives and in the world, is the planet of people. So it's not places, it's people. It's not monuments, it's the people in those places. These are the things that we can work with and work on and really excel and enjoy. The wealth of the human planet is right there at our fingertips, the fingertips of this laptop that I'm talking on. It's a wonderful time to be alive, right? And the joy of the planet is something that motivates me. I've been to a lot of places, and usually under bad circumstances, conflicts and things like that, right? The kids are always making toys out of the stuff on the rubble, right? Babies are getting born, fed, families, everybody loves everybody. Everybody's trying to, it's a wonderful planet. We're a great species. And I think we forget that. I think we lose sight of that. The news is always negative. We tend to have negative emotions more than positive ones, but the world's a wonderful place, right? And to be able to explore it, right? And so easily, whether you travel or you just travel through the internet. You could make a friend in any country who shares your hobby today before close of business.
This program has allowed me to actualize some of that stuff and bringing other people together. But you know what I'm finding, so we're going to move on, but is that a lot of people in a business context, they don't care. They just want to stick with their tribe, if you will, where they're comfortable, and attempt to strengthen that bond and block out others and other things just to maintain that close-knit feeling or sense of control or something. Meanwhile, all this stuff's going on around them, and they're not going to care about what you and I were just talking about.
Well, they should.
They should.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to date myself here because I started working when you mailed something to somebody and you set the file up on your desk and you waited a week for them their mail to come back.
Yeah.
Did that, and it was a day and age where you worked for a domestic company, which, if it wanted to make more profit, established a international department. Then 2 or 3 years after that, they had made, they had a series of sales. They had some regular customers overseas. And then one day there weren't enough widgets and they had to supply a domestic, they had to meet a domestic contract and they had to stiff somebody. So they stiffed the foreign contract. Right. And we had a domestic economy that was large enough, right, and isolated enough that everybody could ignore the world. Despite the fact that we had global deployment post-World War II, right? We, as people living inside an economy and living our careers, were basically free to ignore the world. You didn't need a language. You didn't need to pay attention to this. You would be more successful, matter of fact, if you just ran the domestic team. Okay. Today, your team is producing peasants who have gone to the city in Chinese cities who are producing something, right? It's being shipped to Mexico, right, to be put together someplace. It comes to you for some finishing touches. It was designed by an Italian. You're selling it to French-speaking Canadians, English-speaking Canadians, American, English-speaking, Spanish-speaking, et cetera, speaking Americans in the United States, and then south of the border to all kinds of languages and cultures which are far different than the language you think puts them all together, right? And then you have the European Foreign Office, right? And all these people are showing up on your screen, right? So I understand why we have this paradigm, but I also see that it really is a trap. It doesn't help you anymore, right? Your team is actually composed of all those stakeholders. They are important, powerful stakeholders in your life. It's your supply chain is global. Your marketing is global. All these things are and now I don't want to exaggerate it. There are a lot of sectors and there are a lot of places where this is only part of what you're doing. But the major engines of our economy are globalized. They're transnational companies. They're not American companies, right? And you can be more successful in whatever you're doing in those things if you have the global agility to when the world actually penetrates your domestic world, that it's not a push, that it's something you welcome, something you can deal with, right? It's just a matter of being able to bond with people who you didn't expect to have to bond with. But they are really important. They're stakeholders. And I think that's the biggest takeaway. We now have stakeholders in our lives with real power, not only to limit our success, but to open doors for great opportunities. And I like to look at that side. It's the positive side, right? If you want to really exploit and take, and expand and flower and enrich, right? Hey, the world's your oyster. Just go get it. Right, it's there, and if you don't, you'll be dragged kicking and screaming in that direction. You don't put genies back in bottles.
So I want to introduce you to something, and I'll follow up offline. I've been asked by two people, very senior in a global pharmaceutical company that's American-based, but all over the world. I've been asked by these two people to assist them in a new survey that's organized as well by the University of South Carolina. I'm a business professor there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And we're really not allowed to talk about the name of the pharmaceutical company because they have nothing to do with it. It's the people themselves that are instigating this. And they got this other guy from this professor to actually put those global HR, global business survey that's just coming out yesterday. And Global TV Talk Show is going to be hosting a series of broadcasts to help PR it across the summer. And then in the fall, I'm producing a VIP global conference. VIP doesn't mean you're important and I'm not, or we both are. It has to do with VIP, virtual and in person, a conference that will discuss the findings of this. And your agility thing is, well, I want you to be on that program, by the way, or on the series of programs leading up to the final thing, which will probably be in November. Anyway, the survey has been instrumental, is a result of the items within the survey being instrumental to the careers of these two people. One of the people, I'll be brief, has got a PhD in education and international business, originally from Russia, but has been living in Madrid for several years, and has just relocated into Southern California to for more exposure within the big pharma company, but also to focusing on Latin America because of his Spanish connection and expertise. All right. All right. And so the other person is a woman who's originally from Sydney and very bright, energetic, in a global talent executive role currently, based in Chicago. But I met her 10 or 11 years ago when she was working in New York for a large cosmetics company and, fashion, high fashion. And she was an HR somebody or other, And so, and I don't remember how exactly we met, but somebody introduced me. And I said to this person, why don't they come and talk to my New York City meeting in whenever it was, okay? But it was going back like 10, 11 years ago. And so we set it up. It was in a hotel right across from the United Nations building. And just so you have an idea of that.
Nice place.
Yeah, it was good. I think it was, I forget the name of the street, but it was right across the street from the big tower of the UN building. In fact, it was right next door or just down the street from the German embassy on that side of the street. Okay, anyway, she spoke and we had a full house, a couple of hundred people, and it was a wow. And so she loved it and I loved it and everybody was hunky-dory. It was great. And so to this day, we're still doing business, That was a cold call and now we're still doing things, right? And it's all because of, what do you call that? Happenstance, I guess, or serendipity. It just came together and we wanted it to be positive, right? And we stayed in touch. So now she says, we're doing the survey about, they call it distributed work. In other words, work from, COVID has driven this or brought the future to today or yesterday, real quick, faster
real
than
quick.
faster than a lot of people want it. And now everybody's got to deal with this. So working from home turned out to be working from anywhere, right? And some companies don't like that because the middle managers say, well, how can I be a manager, when you can't see what people are doing and, sniff tests or whatever. And so I know we're running out of time here, but the whole idea now is exactly to what extent is global agility responsible for the success of these two people's burgeoning career in this huge pharmaceutical company. So much so that they asked me to help them do marketing and manage PR.
Well, I was struck by how you bonded with her, and that's the trust bridge that's wide and enduring, and all the rest just was driven across it as opportunities came on. But when you're working internationally or across cultures in that kind of context, you can't take people to court to settle your differences. You better have something else, right? Because if you take them to court in their country, I guarantee you how that's going to end up, right? So you have to, the strongest things that you could have, and you need to get used to it, right? Are trust and mutual interest. And intertwining your mutual interest over long periods of time. That's all you really get, right?
Rob,
and maybe why domestic business people don't like to work internationally, because they don't trust it. But everywhere you gotta be able to work in the neighborhoods. You got to know where you are and who you're with, and you've got to have your friends, right? And that's. You got to stay home, but you can't stay home anymore. Home isn't here. I mean, they took that away, right? Proximity isn't the same thing anymore. You used to have to go somewhere to go there, right? Now with the electronic world, I mean, you could just put the two things together right here, like on this screen, you and me looking at each other. Right?
Rob Pianka, what's your website that people can find you at? Because we got
Globally-Agile.com, globally-agile.com.
Rob Pianka, please come back on Global TV.
Oh, it's so much fun talking to you.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.